Thank you so much, Congressman, and thanks for your leadership in bringing the public's attention to Q in the early moments. Quite frankly, when people may not have had their eye on the ball, and you saw it coming. You saw what was heading our way at the Capitol and the storming of the Capitol, which was a very traumatic event for many people to watch. But I'm sure you weren't taken by surprise by that. And what we're now seeing, and we wrote a report about that about 10 days ago or so, and this is our second report. We're doing this because what we're trying to ensure that we're seeing and sharing publicly, and thank you for the positive comments on what we've been producing, we're trying to ensure that people understand what's happening under the hood in the radicalization online and in the anti-Semitic nature of that. Anti-Semitism is a core component of this radicalization, and much to our dismay at the Congress suite, we've seen Holocaust denial as the critical nub in that activity, in that radicalization process. And this isn't a brand new moment, and here's where I'm going into some of the details of the report. Radicalization online is not something that happened 2 months ago. It's been happening for years, and there have been alternative social media channels, extreme channels, where anti-Semitism and white supremacist activity has always been festering. But what's new right now is that, in particular, in the wake of the deplatforming after the storming of the Capitol, where individuals and groups of Q supporters and also supporters of President Trump, as we've seen, have voluntarily left the mainstream social media platforms. They're looking for alternative platforms to go to. And this is where the intersection occurs, is when they leave the mainstream social media platforms, they head into these alternative platforms that have been living in an anti-Semitic, Holocaust-denying bubble. And then the combination of that movement to the idea of conspiracy theory, which QAnon supporters have become very accustomed to and take for granted, that fits directly into Holocaust denial, conspiracy theory, radicalization, and it's used to say the Holocaust itself did not occur, and it has a willing audience in these new adherents, these new members of these alternative social media platforms, and it's a trend now, and it's a trend that is moving quickly and is growing. And so, from our perspective, what we see is a need for urgent action. We see that this radicalization pipeline is not going anywhere. Individuals leave the mainstream platforms, but that doesn't mean that they leave social media overall. So they're looking for outlets, and action is not something that's easy to come by. And this is a core part of the report, which is looking at how we can begin to work internationally, potentially with countering the radicalization process. Many of these platforms are actually housed outside of the United States. We don't have the Twitters and Facebooks of the world located in the United States. And so there's an international component to this that's very significant. But I want to go back as well to some of the nuggets of the research, which are very important to understand. And we focused in our first report on 24,000 right-wing Twitter accounts. And of those, we found that as a result of and on the days of the storming of the Capitol, 6% discussed insurrection, 40% were QAnon, and 60% were generally what we call MAGA-related, general Trump supporters in MAGA. And we're trying to separate that out because we don't want to make generalizations about groups. What we've seen since that time with the deplatforming is that about 40% of the QAnon accounts have been suspended or closed. 90% of those were suspended by Twitter. So they were pushed off by Twitter. But on the MAGA-related accounts, 23% were closed, but more than two-thirds of those were voluntary, 70%, meaning that there is a group that is not right now identified with Q and conspiracy theory that is choosing to exit the mainstream social media platforms because of fear of either being kicked off or just the general trend. And then where do they go? They go to these extreme sites, and they get radicalized, and they get pulled into, as the Congressman talked about, the anti-Semitic tropes, the Holocaust-denying nature of the white supremacist activity online in these channels. So this is a very significant problem. It's one that cuts across different entities, different groups, different social media platforms. But at the end of the day, this online mobilization and radicalization won't stop unless urgent action is taken. And that's what we're calling for. We're calling for policymakers to look at this with intensity and do what the congressman did, speak out publicly about it, and explore actions that should be taken domestically as well as in partnership internationally to try to get a hold on this and pull us away from this situation. Because as we've seen, and I'll close with this, this isn't just going to go away if we put our hands over our eyes. This is an issue that we're going to have to confront head on. And in the spirit of International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is tomorrow, as we all know, when we leave these types of hate speech and types of radicalization to fester, they will show their ugly head and rear their ugly head. And to honor Holocaust Remembrance Day, we too pledge here at the American Jewish Congress to speak out about this and to try to ensure that people take action. So with that, I'll pause